All right, welcome back. So this is our Kramer module number 6. And what I want to do here is Massachusetts housing regulations. And we are definitely going to see questions on fair housing topics when it comes down to the exam. I can guarantee that you will. Now, there's a lot of detail in fair housing that we need to memorize for these particular sections. And what we've done here is we've sort of distilled it down to the key elements that are going to serve you well as you're studying to orient your mind as to what you need to kind of know to get through the examination. So let's jump into it. And coming up next, we have Massachusetts housing regulations, and that's Kramer number 6. All right, so federal fair housing regulations are sure to be a major topic covered on your real estate examination, but understanding the Massachusetts-specific housing regulations is equally as important. We are definitely going to see a lot of different Massachusetts-style questions come up. And don't forget, just as a note, that test writers know that fair housing questions can elicit some fairly strong reactions in students. And when they do that, knowing this, they try to specifically try to give you things to twist and turn you on these topics. Many times students will err on the side of caution and overpick because they don't want to discriminate in a way by picking the wrong answer. So just stay calm here and focus on the questions and read the answers very carefully, as there will be the deception in these with detail. All right, so let's get into it. Let's take a quick review of the Massachusetts fair housing regulations in this next segment of our real estate Kramer. Number 1, fair housing. So in Massachusetts, it is illegal for real estate professionals and landlords to refuse to sell, rent, buy, or advertise housing based on any of the protected classes. So the next step is, what are our protected classes? So the federal level protected classes are race, color, religion, national origin, familial status, disability and/or handicap, and sex. Now, a note here on sex. In early 2021, gender identity and sexual orientation were added to the classification under sex, and the Federal Fair Housing Act protected classes. Up until that point, they were protected in Massachusetts, but not all other states. You're going to start seeing that emerge on test questions, so we want to know that. Now, in Massachusetts, let's take a look at the mass protected classes. All right, first, religious creed, age, children, genetic information, ancestry, marital status, veteran and/or armed forces status, blind, hearing impaired, or any other handicap, and the receipt of public assistance. So all of those are the Massachusetts-specific fair housing protected classes. As you can see, it's substantially more comprehensive than the those 7 classes in the federal law. Now, Mass is those 7 plus its other protected classes. So you want to start to memorize those and think through those to know, well, what is protected? Here, like for example, marital status, not on the federal level. Familial status on the federal level, which is included here in Massachusetts. Age and children are protected classes here. Familial status only on the federal level. So these are just a couple of the differences that we want to make sure we know. Now, a note. Federal law allows age and familial status discrimination in residential dwellings with 4 or fewer units. However, Massachusetts law only allows that exception in 1 or 2 family dwellings, one of which must be occupied by the owner. The owner cannot use an agent in the rental of the property for those exemptions to apply, nor use any discriminatory advertising. So those are some of the exemptions. And I don't know if you remember, but in your course, we learned that on the federal level, the exemptions are residential properties up to 4 family. But here in Massachusetts, they shrink it down to no more than 2 family on the exemptions. So the owner-occupant can live in one of the units and be a bit discerning as to who lives next door to them. Now, They do expand that sometimes to 3 families if one of the occupants is an elderly or infirm tenant for whom the presence of small children would constitute a hardship. So sometimes they do throw that extra expansion of the exemptions on the exams, so maybe you want to look out for that one. Now, another note here is not included in any protected classes, and we want to know these. So illegal drug users, registered sex offenders, smokers, students, and animals except service animals. So we want to know these are not included in any protected classes. Now, the Fair Housing Notice. Brokers are required to post the Federal Equal Opportunity in Housing poster and the Massachusetts Fair Housing posters in every real estate office, and both need to be clearly visible. All right, the next topic here is the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act. It was enacted in 1990 to protect individuals with disabilities against discrimination in all areas open to the public. The ADA, Massachusetts Architectural Access Board, and the Fair Housing Act all address structural accessibility requirements for housing here in Massachusetts. The next topic I want to cover regarding Massachusetts housing regulations is service animals. So in Massachusetts, we have an office called the MOD, known as the Massachusetts Office on Disability, and it governs the laws that apply to assistance animals in housing. And the note I want you to take is the laws and rules governing service animals, assistance animals, and emotional support animals are rather ambiguous, and you are bound to run into this in practice. However, for now, we are going to focus on the general specifics and legalities as they may relate to testing purposes. So number 1, according to the MOD, a service animal is a dog, or in rare cases, a miniature horse that has been individually trained to do work or perform tasks for a person with a disability. Number 2, you cannot specifically ask a person what kind of disability that they have, and for proof, you must take their word for it. And number 3, this definition of a service dog was revised in 2010 and is still used today. In Massachusetts, number 4, all dogs must be registered, but service animals are exempt from the registration fee. Number 5, a service animal, they are required to be trained but not to have a certification, and states cannot require service dogs to be certified. Number 6, an emotional support animal, also known as an ESA, is an animal that is providing emotional support to a person with a disability just by its presence. Assistance animals are not considered pets under the ADA. Now, both service and assistance animals are often allowed as long as the tenant submits an accommodation request in writing and provides adequate information of the duties of the service animal that they are trained to perform. Emotional support animals are more of a gray area, but just know that they follow the same accommodation request procedures as any other assistance animal. Now, the Fair Housing Act says that it's unlawful for a housing provider, aka a landlord, to refuse to make a reasonable accommodation for a person with a disability to have or an equal opportunity to enjoy and use their residential dwelling. A notice was released by HUD in 2020 which provides additional guidance on which, if any, animals qualify as an exemption from a no pets policy, and questions to identify if it is a pet or an assistance animal. If it's an assistance animal, then what tasks does it complete or contribute to? And these notes that we just went over, these are going to be the general go-to when it comes to practice. But again, this is just to orient us for the exam. A few notes and a couple of important takeaways here. There is never a 100% guaranteed exemption to pet policies in housing, service animals, emotional support animals, or otherwise. They are not automatically exempt. A request must be made in writing. All instances are subject to a request, review, and decision of any potential accommodations. A reasonable accommodation request for an assistance animal may include a request to allow the assistance animal at the property where the housing provider has a no pet policy, or a request to waive a pet deposit or pet fee because a member of the assistance animals are not considered pets. All right. So those were some of the fair housing elements that I want to talk about. I would focus more importantly on things like protected classes and things of that nature, kind of getting those items sorted. And then a little bit on the ADA, maybe a little bit on what the service animal definition is and such, and go from there. And again, these are definitely things that we tend to see on examination practice questions. So I would focus in on fair housing, as it is going to be stuff that you see come up on the exam, and they will be looking for specific answers and give you some challenging interrogatories and some challenging answers to sift through to try to find the correct ones. I wish you luck in your studies, and I wish you luck on your exams.